All right. I'm excited. This is fun. This is going to be a fun evening. It's going to be emotional. I will become emotional a couple of times, probably. It's going to be fun. It's going to be engaging. It's going to be educational. I guarantee that every one of you will learn at least one thing that you did not know before you got here tonight. I have not timed this out. I don't know how long we're going to be. I'm hopeful we'll be coming in somewhere underneath 4 hours. There's a lot involved. I spent a lot of time on this. You can ask my wife, Stacy, but this is what I love to do, and I feel like I've got pretty good context of the history of this community because of what I do. I've been back full-time as a community journalist for 26 years. I wrote my first story for the Courier when I was 11, and so that's a long runway for me to get a pretty good handle on where we've been as a community, all the good, bad, and in between. So before we get going, I just want to sort of set the table here and just take you through a little bit about how this is going to work. These are the top 10 stories of the Freeman community. I did not include the obvious, okay? Obviously, the arrival of the railroad in 1879, pretty big deal, right? Rural electrification, pretty big deal. Great Depression of the 1930s, pretty big deal. Yeah, we felt in this community, but that was felt everywhere. What are some of the nuances? What are some of the unique things to our community that really stand out? So that's an important point to understand. Time frame. I'm using 1893 as the starting year. I do not go back to the settlement that started in 1874 or the arrival of the railroad in 1879. I'm starting with 1893. That is the year that Freeman was incorporated as a town. So that's my benchmark. A little context. The blizzard of 1888 that took 5 school children's lives, that's a top 10 story had it been included in this time frame. But I chose 1893 as my starting point. Criteria I use. Very simple. Emotional impact, community advancement. There are a couple of instances where both are at play, but at least one of those is going to be the reason as to why I chose it. And we'll go through that. How this will work. We'll go through the list, we'll count it down, I'll share the story, give the context behind it, I'll explain to you why it's on the list, and at the very end, there will be time for discussion, hopefully. You can ask questions, you can offer insight, you can correct me. I don't claim to have everything 100% right. I think it is, but that's based on the information that I have. So there may be a subject that you're familiar with where you just want to be like, hey, Jeremy, just so you know, X, Y, and Z instead of Z, Y, and X. So feel free to correct me on those things. And lastly, I'll say this. This is not the definitive list. This is not the list. This is my list. And your list might be completely different. And you may think to yourself, why in the world did he put that on? Or why was that number 7 and not number 3? In terms of the order of the top 10, if I did it again in 6 months, the order might be completely different. I am confident in my number 1 and my number 2. All right, you want to go?
Yep.
All right, let's get going here. Number 10. Charles Melhoff establishes Melhoff Machine and Manufacturing Company, today known as? Very good. It was 1974. Charles Melhoff was a 1971 graduate of Meadow High School. He enrolled in the Machine Tool Technology program at USD Springfield. He dropped out after a year and a half to open a general repair and welding shop in his parents' garage near Menno. And it was during that time he was approached by a delegation of Freeman businessmen encouraging him to expand and bring his operation here. Charles will tell you, to this day, were it not for that invitation, and were it not for a banker at First National Bank named Glenn Waltner, who took a chance on him, he probably wouldn't have come to Freeman. There he is, shortly after opening his shop on Highway 81 in the fall of 1974. We'll get to this in a second. No, let's get to it now. Why is this on the list? Well, Melhoff Machine and Manufacturing would come to have a significant impact on the community's industrial footprint and helped usher in a second business district along Highway 81, far east of the downtown corridor that had built Freeman 95 years earlier. It is also today Freeman's second largest employer, which is consistent with the growth and the steady hand with which the business operated from the start. Melhoff's business grew quickly and earned a strong reputation out of the gate. General welding and repair led to customized manufacturing, and in 1979, Melhoff introduced what would become one of the company's primary products, large snowblowers. 1979 also saw a name change that those who lived in Freeman in the 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s knew well: Wildcats. Why Wildcat? Well, that was a model name he used for one of the company's snowblowers, telling the Courier, quote, "Nobody can remember Melhoff." In the years that followed, Wildcat became involved in the recycling industry, making compost turners, trommel screens, and road patchers for commercial use sold literally around the world. That growth, of course, meant expansion of the physical plant, with nearly 60,000 square feet of additional space added by 1996. And by the turn of the century, Wildcat was one of the largest employers in town, with a payroll of 50. The Melhoffs began transitioning out of the business in 2001, with a Northern Ireland firm called Viper acquiring the business, but keeping everything else the same, including the name. And in 2009, the business was purchased by Vermeer Corporation of Pella, Iowa, and Wildcat Manufacturing became Vermeer Freeman. Today, Vermeer employs 105 people and is known as a company that pays as much attention to how it treats its employees as it does to how well it manufactures its products. The business also represents strong industry and opportunity for employment that helps define this community. And Vermeer today is a strong physical anchor on the east side of town. On that note, it's prudent to look at what followed Melhoff's decision to establish his new business along 81. It's not that there was not a presence on 81 before 1974. There was. Fred Haar Company moved from downtown to the highway in 1972, and in 1951, a man named Wilmer Fensel opened Fensel's Motel on the highway just north of town. Even before that, there was a little burg known as Freedom Corner. Anybody you familiar with Freedom Corner, anybody in here? A few hands go up. I know Judy Schrog's familiar with Freedom Corner. We'll talk about it afterwards, okay? So I could do a whole presentation on Freedom. This sat where Casey's is today, okay? Even at the same angle as Casey's. And this was in full operation by the 1940s, if not a little bit earlier. And the thing that I think is so interesting, and this is a little bit of a side note here to Melhoff, but in the 20s and 30s, Freeman had developed a reputation as a very conservative community. And there was a group of young people, who wanted to maybe have a little bit more fun than what was permitted in Freeman. And you got to also remember, in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, the highway, known then as the Meridian Highway, that was out of town. That was out of town by a ways. And so, from what I gather, this group of people who wanted to have a little bit more fun outside of the watchful eye of the Freeman community decided to establish a little town of their own, not called Freeman Corner, but Freedom Corner, for them to be able to do the things that maybe they wanted to do. So that's it. You can ask Judy Schraub about some of the happenings that took place on those grounds all those years ago. There was also a restaurant called the Airport Inn. Anybody familiar with the Airport Inn? Couple are, yep. That was located just immediately to the north of where Casey's is today. And that would grow into what became known as the Covered Wagon. Marie Wren ended up buying that and then opening up the Covered Wagon, and then at a later point opening up a brand new Covered Wagon on the other side of the highway that still sits there today, right? A lot of people are familiar with what the Covered Wagon was like. So all of this to say that there was a presence on the highway before Melhoff built. But a couple of the things that came after Melhoff opened in '74, rural manufacturing moved from the Hofer Farm west of town to a brand new building on the highway in 1977. A man named Dennis Wallman moved his pharmacy from Main Street to a building that is today known as the Freeman Shopping Center in 1979. And there it is under construction. And we know today Highway 81 as a thriving business district in the same way Freeman's Main Street was a thriving business district in those first 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years of our community's history. And you can identify Vermeer as the largest building pictured on this Google Earth image. That's why Charles Melhoff cracks the top 10. Number 9. I heard the murmuring. Those of us who were around and experienced this know what happened. It was Thursday afternoon, May 12, 2022, and meteorologists had been predicting straight line winds moving across the eastern part of the state. So the storm was not a surprise in that sense. But nobody could expect what was to come. Quote, blacker than midnight, unquote, was one of the reactions from those who experienced it. Talked to people, said they never knew black could be so black. But rather than tell you exactly what happened, I thought I would show you. What you're about to see is a 32-second video clip sent to me by my friend Will Ortman the day following the DeRay show. He's filming as the storm moves into his yard east of Freeman. And at about the 25-second mark, you hear Sherilyn come into the house. And it's a little hard to hear, but she says, "Is it a tornado?" And Will said, "I don't know, but it's not good." Followed by Will telling Sherilyn, "Look at it." And Sherilyn saying frantically, "I see it, I see it," before the family runs to the basement to the sounds of their youngest son screaming. I've been given permission to share this video that nobody's ever seen outside of our families. we've got our kids in the basement. This was my front page headline the next week. Historic May 12 storm has widespread, devastating impact across the region. Harrowing stories are told. Now, it needs to be noted that the devastation wasn't as significant as catastrophic weather events like destructive tornadoes or floods, but it certainly left an impact. Here's some of my reporting in the Courier the week that followed. Freeman Police Chief Scott Brewer turned 53 years old on Tuesday, May 12, and Mother Nature delivered a birthday he will never forget. Brewer was southwest of Freeman at the top of a hill near the corner of 280th Street and 435th Avenue late in the afternoon, observing the incoming storm that would later be identified as a derecho when he called Mitchell Dispatch to have the warning sirens sounded in town. Then, with the storm bearing down on him, he headed back to Freeman at high speeds. But even then, after turning onto Highway 81 and heading north toward town, his patrol pickup was suddenly enveloped by the powerful storm. Quote, "At one point I was ahead of it, but it overtook me. I mean, she was moving. You couldn't see nothing. I couldn't see in front of my windshield, but I kept driving. I needed to get back to make sure the alarm actually sounded." Nikki Melhoff was on the clock as the director of nursing at Oakview Terrace when she saw the storm was approaching. That's when she called her daughter, Mesa, who was at the family home located between Freeman and Menno, to deliver an important message. Get your dad out of the field. Mesa told her, yeah, he's parking. And then said, I think the storm is here. Nikki let her daughter go and got down to business in the nursing home, making sure the residents were all taken cover in their rooms, and then she got a call from Mesa. Quote, I'm quoting Nikki here now. She said, it's over here. It's all over here, but I don't know where Dad is, Mesa told her mom. He was in the shed, and I think he may be hiding under a tractor. Turns out he was, and he was safe and sound. The rest of the farm didn't fare as well. The Melhoffs lost a horse barn used for calving, 2 silos, a grain bin full of corn, a couple of calves, some smaller outbuildings, and a windbreak. What a mess, Nikki said of her thoughts when she returned to the farm. Where do we even start? Stuart Curry, pastor of the Salem MB Church between Freeman and Bridgewater, was at the church doing some work when he got notification on the phone that the storm was coming through. That's when he called his wife, who was at their home 9 miles north of Freeman with several of their children. Quote, she's like, the storm is here, and I could hear the kids screaming in the background, he said, noting that his 11-year-old son said it sounded like a million eggs hitting the house at once. There was nothing I could do, Curry said. I felt horrible. It wasn't until he returned home after the storm had passed that he encountered the damage. His yard was decimated. And that's his yard on that photo right there. Of the 6 grain bins on the property, 2 were in the trees on the opposite side of the house, and another 2 were shredded, littering adjacent fields who knows how far away. The other 2 were badly damaged, probably beyond repair. The garage attached to the home was destroyed, probably from one of the grain bins flying into it, as was a machine shed across the driveway. 2 other buildings on the property used for storage were destroyed, as was a well and a control box near the house. Quote, and my wife's fruit trees are gone, he said. She's pretty bummed about that. The Freeman Academy Marion track team was at practice after school as the storm approached, and all quickly found shelter in the Pioneer Hall basement. Everybody except Jade Kerner. As a distance runner, the Freeman Academy Junior was putting in miles that the others were not, and had been running north near Casey's, 10 blocks from the school, when she sensed the storm was getting close. I turned around and saw this brown cloud, so I picked up the pace, she said. I was a couple blocks away from the campus when I started feeling dust and these tiny little twigs hitting me in the face. By the time she turned onto the block that leads to the school's boulevard, it was a wall of wind and I couldn't see, Kerner said. A branch fell down and hit my arm, and I couldn't even make it to the link, so I stopped at Music Hall to see if the doors were open. Thankfully they were. Inside was Amy Hofer-Vetch, who then texted a panicked Suzanne Kerner, Jada's mom and track coach, who was with the others taking shelter and wondering where her youngest daughter was and if she was okay. Quote, "The best way to put it would be freaked out," said Suzanne. Suzanne had been with her team on the soccer field as the storm approached before they sought shelter, and that's when it hit her that Jada wasn't there. Quote, "I just had to trust that she was in town and would know what to do," unquote. Suzanne said she got the text from Hofer-Vetch about 10 minutes later. Quote, "Praise the Lord." So why is it on the list? Was it the most extreme weather event that the Freeman community has ever seen? I can't say that. There have been devastating windstorms. There have been tornado sightings. But I would argue that the unexpected nature of this and the sheer panic that set in with people when they discovered that it was as black as midnight outside at 4:30 in the afternoon was life-changing. That's why this is on the list. Number 8, 5 die, 2-car collision. This one's going to be tough. It happened in 1962. Show of hands, how many people remember this? More than half. So let's go ahead and set the scene. It was a Sunday afternoon, August 12, 62. Accident occurred on the gravel road 1 mile south of Freeman, located near Spitzberger Lake, what was known then as Roller Coaster Hill. If you need a little bit more context as to where this is, that's the highway today leading to Valley View Golf Course from Highway 81. Interestingly enough, the barn in this photo, obstructed by the trees here, is still there. It's known as Roller Coaster Hill because of the steep incline at about the half-mile mark. And kids would have a lot of fun with that. There was the barn. The accident involved 2 vehicles and 8 people. 4 of the victims were from the same immediate family from Freeman, and the 5th was a young cousin who happened to be in town visiting with his mom. In car number 1, Rodney Gross, to be a junior at Freeman High School, he was the driver, survived. His passenger and classmate, Mary Jo Cheddar, also 16, died at the scene. Car number 2, driver, John E. Kleinsasser, age 50, died at the scene. His passenger and wife, Lydia Kleinsasser, 42, survived. Youngest Kleinsasser daughter, Orlean Kleinsasser, age 14, dead at the scene. The other Kleinsasser daughter, Sherry, age 16, died at the scene. Another passenger, identified only as Mrs. Floyd Whip, survived. Mrs. Whip's 4-year-old son, Kenneth, died on the way to the hospital. Only one member of the Kleinsasser family survived, Gary Kleinsasser, age 11 at the time, decided to be with his friends instead of going on the Sunday afternoon drive that the Kleinsasser family took every week to explore the land. This is how the Courier reported on the accident the following week. Included photos, some of them graphic. Publisher Glenn Gehring at the time editorialized that he published these photos because he wanted to make the public aware of the dangers of automobile travel. Seat belts were just starting to get introduced, and there was a lot of questions about traffic safety at this time. I spoke with Gary Kleinsasser, not Gary Kleinsasser, Herb Kerner. Herb was a classmate of the 3 16-year-olds who died, and he remembers the accident well, and he gave me some additional context behind it that I had never had. And I'm curious if any of you have ever heard this or not. Rodney Gross worked for Kenny Weiland at Jack and Jill, a grocery store on Main Street. And on the afternoon of the accident, there was a funeral at Pioneer Hall for a druggist named Hofer. And the Gross boy took Kenny Weiland's station wagon to Pioneer Hall to deliver buns for the funeral reception. And afterwards, went to pick up Mary Jo to take her for a joyride on Roller Coaster Hill. The accident occurred not long before the funeral let out for the processional out to the city cemetery. And just as people were starting to get word of the accident, the processional was making its way to that cemetery a mile west of town. It was a mess. And I've always wondered why so many people were pictured in this photo and why some of them appeared to be dressed up. I now have my answer. A little bit more context. The vehicle that you see there in the middle of the road, that's the Kleinsasser vehicle. The vehicle in the lower left-hand corner, the portion of it, that was the Weiland station wagon that Gross was driving. You'll see, you can tell by the image what happened. The Gross vehicle had been pulled away from the Kleinsasser vehicle by one of the first people on the scene, a neighbor who lived to the farm that's behind the photographer to the left. They heard this accident. He saw what was happening. This was a horrific, flaming crash. The victims, some of them, their remains were not identified until well after the scene had been secured. And conventional wisdom says, had that vehicle not been pulled away from the Kleinsasser vehicle, the surviving members would have burned to death. Rodney Gross wanted to graduate from Freeman High School in 1970, I'm confused, 64. He graduated in 64, the accident was 62. About 10 years later, he passed away. Rodney did. Speculation is that he died by suicide. Why is it on the list? Well, I'm confident in saying this is the worst tragedy the Freeman community has ever seen to this day. It involved a family that was very well known in the community. It involved a 16-year-old that probably lived the rest of his life with unimaginable grief. It involved a class that had to finish out its junior and senior year. without two of its members? Emotional impact. Let's move on. Let's lighten the mood. George H.W. Bush visits Freeman. There he is. Vice President of the United States at the time. It was 1988. It was Friday afternoon, February 5th, 1988, a brutally cold day in the community of Freeman. It was a campaign stop for the Vice President's quest for the office of presidency, one of three in South Dakota, held at the Freeman Elementary School gym, today the Freeman Community Center, with about 1,200 people in attendance, including 500 students. I was one of them. The visit had been arranged by Calvin Mettler of Menno, the chair of the Hutchinson County Bush for President campaign. George Bush was introduced by South Dakota Governor Bill Janklow. It was primarily a Q&A that lasted for 45 minutes. Topics included education, federal budget cuts, pollution, military involvement in Bolivia, aid to Nicaragua, and agriculture. One young student in attendance said he didn't always understand the vice president because he used a lot of big words. And before he left, Governor Janklow introduced Vice President Bush to Troy and Kirk Wallman, standout wrestlers for the Freeman Flyers. Bush presented the Wallman brothers with t-shirts. Bush, of course, would go on to defeat Democrat nominee Michael Dukakis on November 8, 1988, to become the 41st President of the United States. Why is it on the list? Well, the most well-known political figure ever to visit South Dakota, or Freeman for sure. I mean, anytime a vice presidential candidate comes to your town, that's a pretty big deal, right? But that alone isn't what qualified this for the list. It was the amount of behind-the-scenes effort that went into this visit. To illustrate that, I thought I would read to you a behind-the-scenes account written by my father, who covered the event for the Courier. Vice President George Bush spent about an hour in Freeman last week, but preparations for that hour involved extraordinarily detailed planning and hundreds of hours of preparation. Never before has a Vice President of the United States come to Freeman, and the February 5 campaign appearance provided the community a rare opportunity to see how complex such an event really is. Making arrangements for the appearance of any candidate or public figure involves planning. But when that person is the Vice President of the United States, the task is monumental. There were three major areas of concern: security, communications, and logistics. And while no one would discuss details of these aspects of the visit, it was essential to the Freeman appearance. The office of the Vice President requires extensive security and Secret Service personnel, and they were in Freeman the full week preceding the Bush visit. It included complete inspections of the Freeman High School and the accompanying music room and lunchroom. Several hours before Bush arrived, a complete sweep of the building was conducted by 2 dogs trained to sniff out explosives. Security also involved background clearance checks on people working with the visit and becoming familiar with the community. Security personnel could be seen around town the entire week. Among the places checked out was the Freeman Community Hospital, a grim reminder of the danger such a visit poses to the Vice President. Another major aspect of the visit was providing communication links between Freeman and Washington. Telephone lines and radio equipment were installed with a specific communications team brought in to install and monitor the systems for the Bush appearance. Site preparation involved planning precisely how and when Bush would arrive, the format of his appearance, knowing the layout of the gym and adjoining rooms, making arrangements with the school. A Sioux Falls firm was hired to provide the lighting, sound system, and assist with the physical layout of the gym for Bush's appearance. Word of the Bush campaign appearance broke last weekend, and by Monday, city officials and area law enforcement personnel were being briefed on what would be required. Snow removal and gravel for the streets on which Bush's motorcade would travel were among the early requests. When the motorcade, more than a dozen vehicles, including an ambulance, arrived in Freeman Friday afternoon, in addition to the highway patrol escort, the Freeman Volunteer Fire Department and the local game warden were a part of the traffic control team. The size, scope, and comprehensive nature of the preparations were an eye-opening experience for many. The number of Secret Service agents with their earphones and small handheld transmitter cubes increased dramatically in the hour before Bush's arrival. On Friday, a security man was placed on the roof of the Freeman Elementary School building despite a wind chill of more than 50 degrees below zero. Security was very visible, although somewhat inconsistent. While the instruments of the Freeman High School band and the members of the press were searched, there were no searches of purses, bags, etc. of the general public entering the FHS gym. A little different than today. Clearly, the Bush campaign was hoping for media exposure of the visit. National media following the Bush campaign was part of the entourage. The three major television networks sent camera crews along with Bush on his Friday visits to Watertown, Mitchell, and Freeman. NBC, CBS, and ABC set up at the rear of the FHS gym to record the visit to the Heartland. The elementary school students, with their helium-filled red and blue balloons and hand-colored American flags, attracted the attention of the camera crews, as did several signs critical of the Reagan administration's policy. Money for schools, not Star Wars, was one of them. For the most part, however, the national media appeared to find little worth reporting in the Bush visit to Freeman. The appearance here never made the national news. There was nothing new in the Freeman visit to report, said a writer with the New York Times, noting that the visit was designed to give Bush exposure in the heartland and to promote the message that Bush is concerned about local, rural America. I think it belongs on there, and I'm a Democrat. Number 6, Schmeckfest debuts. We'll talk about the placement on this top 10 list at the end. After I was reviewing it, I'm like, that maybe could have been higher. But we'll see. 1959, right? We know the story, it's been told a million times, but let's just go ahead and just review it again, just in case one of us has forgotten. The Freeman Junior College Women's Auxiliary decides to celebrate its 10th anniversary with a supper featuring ethnic foods from the Swiss, Hutterite, and Low German cultures. Some wondered, why would people from the community come to eat the foods that they can make at home? But they decided, nonetheless, let's go ahead and give it a try. They decided to make it a one-time, single-day event, set for Friday, March 13, 1959, and they decided to call it Schmeckfest. Festival of Tasting. One of my favorite background stories about the naming of the festival is that before they decided on the name, one of the considerations was Schnitzfest, which they decided against because the Schnitz was the name of a bar in Menno. So Schmeckfest it was. The women planned to feed 200 people, maybe a few more. More than 1,000 showed up, exhausting food supplies. Guests left to go and eat elsewhere in town, with local restaurants also running out of food. I can only imagine the panic on the faces of those in the kitchen that evening. There are stories of people being able to see through those Pioneer Hall windows, the legs through the windows in line as they were running out of food. And I would imagine there maybe were even a few four-letter curse words uttered under the breath of some of those lovely ladies. I remember Ruby Waltner telling me a story. She was a college student at the time, and she was serving as they were getting low on any food, and she distinctly remembers being horrified serving a prominent Marion businessman a hot dog and a peach. Not what he came for. The event was described as a disaster, and the women said, never again. But of course, as the story goes, a writer with the Mitchell Daily Republic wrote, if you ever have another Schmeckfest, we'd like to know about it. Schmeckfest did return in 1960 as a two-day event, and the rest, as they say, is history. Advanced tickets started in 1961. Demonstrations began in 1963. The meal moved from buffet to family-style serving in 1965. The musical debuted in 1967. There had been evening entertainment in the years prior to that, but 67 marked the first year of that full-scale musical tradition that we've had ever since, the Red Mill, right? The festival moved to a Thursday, Friday, Saturday format in 1973. Schmeckfest was featured in the Minneapolis Tribune in 1978. Schmeckfest, a taste of the sentimental. And just a personal note, the woman pictured on the right, the smiling, lovely woman, that is my great-grandmother, Caroline Waltner, mother of my grandfather, Del. Schmeckfest celebrated 50 years in 2008, which featured the addition of Sterling Hall, a game changer for the festival. 2008 was also the year the festival moved to a 4-day, 2-weekend format. The meal moved back to a buffet-style format in 2018. Of course, it was canceled in 20, 21, and 22 due to concerns about the pandemic. Organizers chose a hybrid model those 3 years, offering drive-through meals that could be picked up in the vehicle safely, as well as a reopened country kitchen the third year that was a bustling. And Schmeckfest returned in all its glory in 2023 as a scaled-back Friday, Saturday events. Why it's on the list? Well, Schmeckfest obviously helped put Freeman on the map. There are scads of people, thousands, who would never have heard about Freeman, let alone visit the community, were it not for Schmeckfest. That alone probably qualifies the debut of Schmeckfest and all it would lead to as a top 10 story. But it's a lot more than that. For that, we turn to a family friend of ours named Jack Marsh. Jack Marsh is a journalist, civic-minded resident, Sioux Falls, family friend, appreciates the good life. Here's what he wrote following his visit in 2016. It's about fellowship, about community members collaborating to celebrate heritage, family, and a sense of belonging. Tour buses from around the country, college students taking a break from their studies, Freeman natives who have moved elsewhere, even those with no connection to the community, are coming back year after year for this festival that has become about so much more than tasting. Jack is right. Big picture, Schmeckfest is about the preservation and celebration of this town's rich cultural heritage through food, arts, music, volunteer spirit, hospitality, and a strong value placed on living with one another in community. I would go so far as to say that without Schmeckfest, much of the heritage that we hold so dear today would have been lost with time. Number 5, the South Church Fire. I see a lot of people from that congregation in the room here. We'll set the scene early Saturday morning, August 10, 1985. Fire called in 5:15 a.m. that morning by passersby who noticed flames coming from the pastor's study located in the northeast portion of the educational wing. This photo is taken looking west. Fire was actually thought to be under control by 9. Although the educational wing was believed to be damaged beyond repair, and there was considerable smoke damage elsewhere. But largely, people felt like the church was spared. Some firefighters remained on the scene for a final check of the building and to hose down remaining hot spots. Around 10 a.m., as they were completing their check of the education wing's second level, they opened a storage door and a fireball shot out, sending them reeling. It is believed that the fire had been smoldering in the room the entire time, only to erupt once it received oxygen from the open door. The reignited fire chased everyone from the building and spread quickly. Any additional attempts to get back inside were futile because of the smoke and the heat. Roland Preheim, church custodian. It was the first fire that damaged. It was the second fire that destroyed. I believe this to be among the most powerful images ever captured by the Freeman Courier the morning after the fire. Making the tragedy all the worse was the circumstances that surrounded the fire. Firefighters said right away that the South Church fire appeared suspicious. They found evidence of vandalism after going through the building after the first fire: books, papers, spray paint. Some of the references on the walls spray painted Satan. 3 days later, David Hansen, age 18, John Kaufman, age 17, were arrested in conjunction with the fire. Kaufman, whose family was a member of the church. On March 7, 1986, a Turner County jury found Hansen guilty of third-degree burglary, first-degree intentional destruction of property, and third-degree aiding and abetting another to commit arson. It was John who actually started the fire. Hansen was later sentenced to 12 years in the state penitentiary. Because Kaufman was 17 years old at the time, this case was handled in juvenile court. South Church was rebuilt, and the new building was dedicated on May 17, 1987, striking remarkable resemblance to the church that had been destroyed 2 years earlier. Well, as if this story couldn't get any tougher, it does. The church fire happened in what is, without question, the most tragic decade in the history of the Freeman community. 1981. Fire destroys Jerry's IGA grocery store on Main Street. 1981, farm accident claims life of East Freeman farmer Max Miller. 1983, traffic accident takes life of 33-year-old businessman Dennis Coakley. 1984, 4-year-old Sterling Pancratz dies in a stock dam on the family farm. 1984, Janice Hofer shoots and kills Andrew Whipf and his son, Andrew Whipf Jr., over a water dispute on adjoining land. 1985, the South Church fire. 1985, explosion at the Marion elevator, kills 3, injures 4. 1985, Freeman EMT Gary Gertz dies in a car accident at age 28. 1986, car accident claimed lives of Christ J. Delilah Kaufman. 1986, Lisa Letcher, wife of assistant football coach Brad Letcher, dies at her home following coronation. She had just turned 26. 1987, car accident takes life of Freeman Alderman Orville Whipf. 1987, fire destroys Zari auto body. How much can one community take in a few short years? Heart attack, 1988, kills Freeman public business manager Robert Roskins. And then there's one other thing. 6 weeks after the South Church fire, the Freeman Junior College and Academy Corporation votes to close Freeman Junior College. Was the fire the straw that broke the camel's back? It's on the list, the fire is, not only because of the emotional impact it had on the families of that congregation and the community as a whole, but it stands today to represent one of the darkest decades in our history, which is not always nice. Number 4, Class B Boys Basketball Championship of 1975. Let's turn those frowns upside down, people. Oh yeah, this is a fun one. All right, here's the context. Freeman High School's 1974-75 team entered the season as the number 1 ranked team in Class B with high expectations. The Flyers had developed a strong basketball culture in the years prior, starting with the 1962 team playing in Freeman's first state tournament. Although that team faltered, losing 2 games at state after winning every game during the regular season and the district and region tournaments, and ended up finishing 7th. The team from 62 included some familiar names. From left, Dennis Wallman, Gary Pfeiffer, Bob Shamber, Ray Schultz, Jim Gullickson, and Reno Hoover. While they didn't win the state championship they had hoped for, they set the stage for what would come 15 years later. The 74-75 team appeared to be one of destiny. Even the sign on the gym wall at the start of the season, "Out to be number 1," set the expectation. Let's just go ahead and name the team. Left to right standing, Kent Mendel, Mike Waltner, Dave Jones, Gary Gertz, Bob Petey, Keith Massey, Kent Miller, Mark Gross, Brad Letcher, Brad Weems, John Dangle, and Kerry Collar. Front, we have Coach Ron Bennett, assistant coaches Wayne Knoll and Burnell Glanzer, and student manager Craig Craven. These boys were the hottest ticket in town, hands down. It was standing room only. I was not alive, but I can't even imagine what it must have been like. Remember, they played in that little Freeman High School gym. This was years before the big gym was built. People said you had to get there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to try to get a seat. Am I right, Judy and Karen? It must have just been wild. They played undefeated basketball during the regular season. They were number 1 the whole time. They beat Harrisburg 91-54 for the District 21 title to move to 22-0. They defeated Viborg and Elk Point to claim the Region 6B championship and advanced to the state tournament in Sioux Falls with a perfect 24-0 record. all eyes turned to Sioux Falls and the Sioux Falls Arena and Civic Center, built in 1961, and incidentally enough, designed by the same architect who designed rural medical clinics and the North Church Spitznau. True story. The Sioux Falls Arena at the time must have been the absolute thrill of the city. Look at this mint new auditorium where the Class B tournament was played, packing as many as 10,000 people inside the gym for the games. And in '75, Freeman defeated Stickney and Flandreau to set up the championship showdown with Del Rapids St. Mary. This game, to this day, is considered one of the best, or not the best, Class B boys basketball championship game that's ever been played. Not only because it was a great game, Freeman had to come from behind late in the fourth quarter to win, but because it is the only Class B game on South Dakota record to feature two undefeated teams. A stat that was confirmed this afternoon by the South Dakota High School Basketball Sports Hall of Fame. Well, here we go. Freeman wins 61-55, right? They trailed by as many as 12 points in the fourth quarter. And wouldn't you look at this, there was another Freeman High School basketball team that just not so long ago won the second Class B basketball championship. And look at this stat. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now let's go ahead and just watch this game turn. Remember, Freeman had been on the ropes for almost the entire game. It was with less than 2 minutes left that they finally tied the game and then took the lead. Let's see what that was like, shall we? Oh, hang on. I gotta do something real quick. Sorry, I gotta connect to my hotspot. It's gonna be worth it, I promise. I'm going to back up just a little bit. So it's about 1:30 in the game here. Freeman's trailing by 2. 1:30 left to play.
Rapids by 2. Out to Haven. There's a steal by Gross. Off to Petey. 1:38 to go. Collar. Petey. No. Pushing. It's called on Fitzgerald. 1-1 for Petey. Compiler makes the ball. One thing, Jim, about the Flyers, they've never lost their composure the entire game. They've trailed practically all the way. It's very early, but they never lost their poise. Petey is at the line with a 1-1. No good. Rebound, Collar. Collar. 53 all. 22. Petey makes the steal. Waltner. Freeman leads 55-53. And Del Rapids St. Mary's wants a timeout with 1:16 to play. We're going to keep it 16 seconds.
Okay, I want to show you two things specifically, okay? I want you to rewatch two things.
No good.
I'll let you know, just hang on.
53 all.
Okay, after the PD steal, it goes to Michael Waltner, and Michael Waltner does a full extension, beautiful, perfect form, right-hand layup, right? Okay, watch that. And then after the timeout is called, we see Kerry Collar, one of the Freeman players, sprinting down the court with his hand up in the air, and as he jumps into the huddle, he's lifting his index finger as a word number 1. Okay, so watch those two things.
Number 22. Petey makes the steal. Waltner. Freeman leads 55-53.
There's Kerry.
St. Mary's wants a timeout with 1:16.
Okay, now, look at this. There's Zalea. And there's Carrie Collar. I just think that's so cool. Why it's on the list? When those boys got back to Freeman, man, they were the absolute toast of the town. Heroes, celebrities, call them what you want to call them. They were absolutely loved. There's a welcome home packed inside that old high school gym, home of the State B champs. So emotional impact, yes, no doubt about it. But also community advancement. This was the first team state championship. The boys track team won the state title in '73, but this was the first true team state championship in '75. And every other state championship that have followed, or not, was the expectations were set by what these boys did. Look at all of what came after. Freeman became a sports town on the shoulders of the '75 title. There's one state championship that needs to get added there yet. Maybe they're waiting until the boys go win a couple more this coming year. Number 3, the public school fire. A little background on this. The public school district was organized on June 16, 1880. It's a long time ago. The first school building was located on what is today Lions Park. And the second building opened in 1901 on the same location. There she is. There it is in the context of the community at the time. If you look to the left, you can see Freeman's College building, today Music Hall, on the left to get your bearings, get your context as to where you are. So that was the school. Here's one more look at the grand structure. Opened in 1901. This building was in use on October 12, 1923, the day of the fire. In fact, students had just been dismissed for the day. And as one story goes, there were 2 high school students who had a date with 2 of the lady teachers in Mitchell that evening and asked the superintendent if they could be let out of the school 15 minutes early. And there's some speculation, folklore or not, that maybe had that not happened, there would have been students inside the building at the time of the fire. All right, there's a lot more to this story. And the lot more of this story is why it's on the list. It's not on the list because the fire destroyed the school. It's on the list because of what happened afterwards. Just a couple of things to keep in mind before we get into all of that. So this was the footprint of the town in 1923, about a little over a third of the size of Freeman today in terms of where the development took place. The school was located on the blue square, and when the discussion started about rebuilding, there was a question of whether or not they should rebuild on the east side of town, where the red star is. And this was very, very controversial in town. Remember, the blue star is the heart of the community. That's near the business district, that's near the railroad, that's near the rail yard, within walking distance for a lot of the kids. You build on the east side of town, that's going to be too far to travel. What are the kids going to do when they get out of school? Are they going to go straight home, or are they going to go cause shenanigans elsewhere in town? Like, this is a major, major controversial issue in 1923. So what do? Well, you hold a bond election, and the bond election was twofold. Number 1, do we fund a new school? And number 2, where do we build the school? Those were the 2 things that the voters were concerned about. Most people figured, yeah, we're going to go ahead and pass a bond to build a school. The location question was more in question. It was a $55,000 bond, 106 against, 293 for. The location, 158 old, 250 new. So the east side wins, right? And that's the school that came of it, opened in 1925. Notice the remarkable similarities between this building and the Freeman Academy Administration building that was built 1 year later. It's not a great photo, but this shows the context of the school as opposed to the rest of the town, yet to be developed. And this is why it's on the list. I believe that the decision to build the new school on the east side of town is almost solely responsible for the growth that we saw following 1925. Here's just a little example. School opens, ball field opens, a new residential block on the hospital opens, another residential district in the St. Paul Lutheran Church opens. More development until we get the blueprint that we... I guess what I'm saying is, what would have happened had they decided to build the school at the old location? We don't have any idea, but I doubt that we would have seen the growth that we saw to the east. And that's the community that we enjoy today. Number 2, the establishment, Freeman Community Hospital. There she is, brand spanking new, 1952. Medicine in one form or another is as old as civilization itself, and the Freeman community residents had access to these services long before the hospital was established. We need to go ahead and note that. Dr. A.A. Whip, why is this acting funny? Sorry, hang on. Dr. A.A. Whip was practicing medicine in Freeman as early as 1894 and continued that service until 1 week before he died on December 21, 1933. He was 64 years old. And it was around that same time that Courier publisher J.J. Mendel planted a seed that 10 years later would take hold. This is what Mendel wrote on November 1st, 1933. Some time ago, a man from Tyndall inquired about renting the old college building for a hospital. Quite often, people ask why Freeman has no hospital. Parkston has one, Scotland has one, Parker has one, so many towns about the size of Freeman. With 3 good doctors in town that can do skillful surgical work, it would seem to be within the range of probability to start a hospital in Freeman. One of the men practicing medicine around that time was Dr. Ernest J. Hofer, pictured here with his wife Elsie, who was a key player in early discussions. He began his private practice in Freeman in 32, the year before Whip died. And then on March 9, 1944, 14 community leaders met to begin the tedious task of planning for a community hospital. In May of 1951, construction begins. September of 1952, Freeman Community Hospital is dedicated with more than 2,000 people attending. And this is not the hospital after it opened. This shows an addition. This is after 61 because the St. Paul Lutheran Church had been built. But this gives you a pretty good sense of the perspective of how the town was developing. In 1960, a 16-bed addition was added. 1963, rural medical clinics established. 1971, a 30-bed nursing home completed. 1979, a 29-bed nursing home addition completed. 1994, major expansion called the Connection Project completed, updating the ER facilities considerably, linking the hospital with rural medical clinics, vacating the city street in the process. 1996, Walnut Street Village built. 2004, Freeman Community Hospital and Nursing Home becomes Freeman Regional Health Services. 2007, Dewald Street Village built. 2020, Freeman Regional Health Services purchases property immediately east of Stadium Drive and Lincoln Drive. Today, Freeman Regional Health Services remains an independent healthcare facility, although it is affiliated with Avera. Since 2023, Freeman Regional has been merged with the Salem Mennonite Home, an assisted living facility established in Freeman in 1949, 3 years before the hospital. And today, Freeman Regional Health Services is continuing to make plans to begin construction on a new healthcare campus on the land it purchased in 2020, starting within a year. And if you don't know, this land is located immediately east of Stadium Drive and immediately east of Walnut Street Drive. Why it's on the list? Well, not only did the hospital become a major employer, Freeman's largest today with over 200, it also had a considerable impact on the community, even beyond the attraction a hospital is to a rural town. You think about all the auxiliary healthcare services that we have available to us: pharmacy, chiropractic care, vision, dental. That's all part of the healthcare system that we enjoy here. And I wonder, had Freeman Community Hospital never been established, would those services have come here, creating Freeman as a destination for people who need those essential services? That is why it is number 2. Number 1, anybody got a snare drum? Founding of South Dakota Mennonite College in 1900. Country schools were introduced to the rural landscape not long after the community settlement began in the 1870s. As we learned earlier, Freeman Public was incorporated in 1880. But Mennonite church leadership saw a bigger picture. At issue, public schools were taught by teachers with little training and who spoke only English, thus ignoring both the German language and religious instruction these immigrant families had received in Europe. And locally, formal education at the time did not extend beyond the grade school year. What were these older students to do if they wanted to continue their education here in Freeman and not have to go to some other community? Well, the idea, right? The idea was to establish a German school that would train future teachers to help supply the country schools with instructors who could teach both the required English subjects and German religious classes. Meetings in support of this endeavor began at the Salem Zion Mennonite Church in March of 1900. I'm going to read for you an excerpt out of Many Hands, Minds, and Hearts. The first half written by Marie J. Waltner, the second by our own Marnette D. Hofer, Ortman Hofer, I should say. And here's what Marie Waltner writes. This is about the first meeting. This is important. March 11 was a beautiful day, and the meeting was attended by a considerable number of people who were most vitally interested and represented various Mennonite congregations. Christian Kaufman of the host church served as chairman and presented the purpose of the meeting: the necessity of establishing a Christian school for the young, and the possibilities of doing so were discussed. It was recommended that the members of the different congregations represented consider the subject carefully so that plans and suggestions might be forthcoming by the time of the next meeting, which the group decided to hold in Freeman. At this second meeting, the interest which was shown left no doubt that the school could easily be established. The question was then raised, where to establish it? Since such a school would be of material advantage to the town in which it was located, it was agreed to offer other towns in the area the opportunity to say what they would contribute if the school were located within their boundaries. The third general meeting on June 17th was also held in Freeman. Representatives of several towns were present to make their offers. This meeting seemed to be somewhat lacking in the good order which had been achieved by the previous two, and no agreements were reached. Kaufman relates, quote, "No unity was achieved because the majority of the school friends of that time sympathized with the idea of considering Freeman the center of the Mennonite settlement and did not wish to consider any other offers. Thereupon, the other towns withdrew, and, in part, so did the surrounding area." And at the fourth general meeting held on July 8th, Freeman was chosen as the location for the proposed school. South Dakota Mennonite College Corporation was organized on December 10, 1900. Classes began in October of 1903. Got a typo there, sorry. Enrollment that first year reached 109 students in both the lower level and upper level high school classes. Lower level classes were discontinued in 1907. College classes were offered for the first time starting in 1918. It's a little deceiving. It was called South Dakota Mennonite College, but it didn't actually open as an institution offering college classes. It was training instead. The dorm dining room was built in 1906. The girls, something's out of order here, hang on. Oh, here we go. All right, let's start over. We read this. Lower level classes discontinued. College classes offered for the first time in 1918. The dorm dining room was built in 1906. The girls' dorm, known as a cottage, was built in 1915. The gym auditorium, built in 1923. New administration classroom building, built in 1926. And by 1950, Freeman Junior College and Academy was thriving, thanks in part to the construction of a building unlike any other in the area. Pioneer Hall. Here's a look at the campus, I presume shortly after Pioneer Hall was constructed. And the second 50 years. The 1960s brought two significant changes. One was the construction of a new dorm for college students called Frontier Hall, built in 1965. The other was school reorganization, which led directly to the demise of one-room country schoolhouses, making the college's main purpose up to that point, to prepare students to teach, irrelevant. Freeman Junior College pivoted, moving from teacher training to a focus on early childhood education, nursing, and a heavy construction equipment operations program. None were sustainable. And in October 1985, the corporation made the difficult decision to close the college, keep open Freeman Academy. The final 40 years, right? The vote in 85 to close the college at the end of the 86 academic year included the addition of grades 7 and 8 to Freeman Academy's existing 9 through 12 program. In 1992, grades 5 and 6 were added to the 7-12 curriculum. The grades 1 through 4 classroom was introduced in 2012, with kindergarten added in 2019. With an enrollment of just 3 during the 23-24 term, kindergarten was discontinued the following year. And on January 31, 2026, the Freeman Junior College and Academy Corporation voted to end Freeman Academy as an educational institution at the conclusion of the 26 school year. Final day was May 20, 2026. So why is this on the list? Why is this on the list as number one? It somehow feels fundamentally wrong to identify the establishment of South Dakota Mennonite College as my number one story in Freeman's history in the same calendar year as the school ceased its educational operation. But the 126-year impact that the school has had on Freeman and the surrounding area cannot be overstated. When Freeman was identified as the location for the new training school, Freeman suddenly had an enormous advantage over other communities, particularly as the school evolved in those first 50 years. The students and their families who enrolled at Freeman Junior College and Freeman Academy, even if they were from the countryside or from another community, immediately felt an emotional connection to the town. The rural countryside east of town became known as East Freeman, while the area to the west became West Freeman. Many of those living north and south of town, particularly if they took association with the school, also identified their home community as Freeman, even if their telephone number or city address was different, and therefore chose to do business here. And without the establishment of South Dakota Mennonite College in 1900, it's unlikely we would have Schmeckfest, or Heritage Home Museum and Archives, or the Prairie Arboretum. And it's possible that the strong Freeman Public School District that exists today would not be the same had another educational center a half mile to the west never existed. In short, and in conclusion, I believe that Freeman is the thriving, prosperous, and forward-thinking community it is today, in large part because of what happened 126 years ago. And that concludes my presentation. I know it's warm in here. It's 4 minutes before 9. If you need to go, go, but I would love to get a little bit of feedback. Here's another look at my top 10. I mean, just questions, observations, corrections, anybody. What'd I miss?
1970, March. District basketball tournament. The academy beat the high school.
Oh! I love it.
It was a big deal.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. Anything? Did I get anything wrong? That's my biggest question. Did I get anything wrong? From those who know the stories maybe better than I.
In the 1975 game, state meet out in senior year, Gary Gertz should have been listed, and he wasn't on that picture.
Oh, okay.
But he must have been to the right side, because he was definitely in play.
Okay, Gary Gertz was not listed on the team photo, so that's an oversight, so thank you for that.
Gary didn't die in a car accident. I mean, he was in an emergency vehicle.
He was in the emergency vehicle and was struck by another vehicle. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Donna.
And we did make sausage every year during COVID.
And they made sausage every year. Of course you did, Dwayne. Of course you did.
We didn't know what to do with it.
I know. Marlon.
Jeremy, I don't think there's anything up there about the Freeman Courier.
There is not anything up there about the Freeman Courier.
That's a mistake.
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, in my opinion, that might be right up there with the invention of electricity. But no, I mean, to your point, Marlon, you know, the Courier didn't come around until 1901. And the only reason, there were two papers in Parkston, Parkston Advance, which still exists, and the Parkston Courier. And the only news that was reported prior to 1901 was published by the Hudson Herald. And there were Freeman businessmen who didn't like that. Freeman businessmen felt like they should have their own newspaper. And so they went to the publisher of the Parkston Courier and said, would you consider moving, since Parkston has 2 papers, would you consider moving the Courier to Freeman? And he took the bait, and he did. So we became the Freeman Courier in April of 1901. An interesting fun fact, J.J. Mendel took over in 1902. Since 1902, there have been 4 publishers, 2 of them with the last name Waltner. That's an incredible stat.
But the J.J. Mendel story.
Yeah, the J.J. Mendel story. He was a legend. He was a classic character in this town. I mean, he was a weird dude. You know, he tended to blend editorial opinion with news content. You know, some of the way he phrased his sentences were just downright funny. But he died. The paper was his life's work. He also dabbled in he was a teacher, and he ran the local telephone switch for a while. But the paper was his life's work, and he died the day he sold it.
His motto was, I'd rather wear out.
Yeah, I'd rather wear out than rust out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, pretty cool.
How many years was
He bought it in 02 and sold in 60. Sold to Glenn Gehring in 60. Glenn had it until 84, and my dad had it until 16, and then Stacy and I took it over. And we're still plugging along. So, listen, thank you for coming, Marnette. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for hosting these incredible events. This stuff is really important. This stuff's really important. And I guaranteed you that you would learn one thing, at least one thing. Yes? Nobody needs their money back? Okay. All right, it's warm. It's 9 o'clock. Go enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you for coming, your attention. This was a lot of fun for me, so thank you all.